gonna get a little. Oh shit! There we go. Sorry. We're gonna get a little salty in this episode. Hey, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And welcome to the Sea and Land Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sahno. And as I said, welcome. This podcast is brought to you by none other than Sea and Land Fitness. Check out the website. We've got a brand new website. We've got a ton of merchandise. I put up a bunch of new Garmin watches. I just got my brand new Garmin Instinct Camo. Don't worry, I didn't retire my Instinct Tactical. I just wanted to do a little bit of a change and get jazzed about all the new watches that are coming. We also have hats, shirts, all that stuff. All right, now that that's out of the way, I told you in the beginning of the episode that we're going to be getting a little bit salty. Apparently I'm not changing my demeanor or behavior. No, I'm not complaining in this episode. This episode is basically informative, and there's an interesting backstory to why this episode developed. I'm going to have a sip of coffee real quick. Peter Madeira, this is for you. So there's an interesting backstory on why this episode was made. So this episode's about sodium. We're going to be talking about sodium. I have these conversations. I'm in a master's program at the University of Florida in applied physiology and kinesiology. So sodium, specifically sodium potassium pumps, come into the discussion often, and there are a number of things that are going on in society, nutritionally, that have caused me to ask a number of questions. So what is the effect of sodium on diabetes? And if you have diabetic clients who are taking blood pressure meds, and one of them's a diuretic, what do you do? You know what I mean? How do you help them deal with heavy electrolyte loss? Which I'm going to go into some of the mechanisms in a little while, but these were questions that I had, and I think that there is literally a fatal misunderstanding of sodium. We have this 10,000, 30,000 foot view of, why we need, or not why, of what we need to do with sodium. So we need to limit our sodium intake. We need, the American Heart Association, it's the number one causative reason for and that's their blanket statement. It's the number one contributor to death. High salt, high sodium leads to death. Boom. Okay. So we've got this fear response that's being experienced within the general public and within even the medical community that is saying that sodium, bad. And contextually, they're absolutely correct. And I'm going to go into why, but we'll say prima facie, on its face, the information that they're giving is such a minuscule part of the story. I'm trying to relate it to something else, and I'm having difficulty. It's such a generalized statement that offers no insight into what you're supposed to be doing. And most people don't know what sodium is. There's a couple of words, and I wrote a lot of notes. You can see I got a ton of notes if you're watching this on YouTube. I got a lot of notes because there is a lot of information that I have to give you guys. Some of it I know from, school, but some of it, I had to research, and I went and did a deep dive, because even in the textbooks, our nutrition textbook, which Dr. Fink, she did a great job explaining it, but in other text sources, they make blanket statements that don't really describe what the function of salt is. And I think that's the most important part. And to understand how we need to use salt, how we need to use sodium in our diet correctly. Wow, I just framed that, and I think I did a pretty good job. Now, what is sodium? First off, sodium's an electrolyte, and it regulates the water levels within and around your cells. So that's all your fluids that are going around your bodies and everything, your interstitial fluid, all that stuff, and in your blood, but also within the cells. Now, there's a higher concentration of sodium on the outside than on the inside. On the inside is potassium, and we're going to get to potassium because that's an interesting key that doesn't get discussed in this whole conversation. Now, a lot of people don't so look at Gatorade, look at Powerade, look at all of the hydration drinks. All of them say high in electrolytes. I would posit that the majority of the people who drink them don't know that there's electrolytes in them. Just know that they know about the water aspect. I need to drink. I need to stay hydrated because of hydro, water, H2O. And I think that most people don't even know that electrolytes are in there and required. And if they do know that they're in there, they don't know what they are. And we're going to be talking about 2 electrolytes today. Now, what is an electrolyte? They're minerals in your blood and in the other fluids, as I said, within and outside the cell, and they carry electrical charges, okay? And basically this charge helps to drive the movement of chemicals from one tissue to another in response to some physiological reaction. So some physiological need. And there are 2 types of movement that these electrolytes use. One of them is called the chemical driving force, and the other one is called the electrical driving force. So there are tons of videos that explain this. Some of them actually do it really simply, and I love these guys because they make great videos, and maybe I'll put one in the description. I don't know. Hold on, another sip of coffee real quick. So basically, inside the cells of your body, you have more potassium than sodium. Outside the cells, you have more sodium than potassium. So we have sodium wants to go to a place where it's not. I'm simplifying this tremendously, but I'm trying to make it so that you can conceptualize if you don't have a degree in physiology or biology. I'm trying to simplify it so you can conceptualize what's going on. So you have a chemical right here, sodium, and you have a cell. And you have more sodium on the outside and less sodium on the inside. Sodium wants to go where it's not. You know what I mean? It wants to evenly distribute itself. Okay? That's important. It wants to evenly distribute itself. So that's the chemical driving force. So you can think of that in terms of like water, okay? Water tends to find a way in. I don't know if you had a car that has a window seal that's just not right, and water tends to find a way in. So within the physiological environment that exists inside your body, there are places where sodium is less on one side and higher on the other side. And that sodium wants to go where there's let's say a sodium vacuum. Okay, so that's in a nutshell the chemical driving force. The electrical driving force is, okay, so we have these things called these channels, okay, and these channels allow potassium. Remember I said potassium was inside the cell. It allows potassium to leak out, okay? So you got positively charged sodium ions. You got positively charged potassium ions. So there's a plus and a plus. Look on your battery. One side's plus, one side's minus, negative, okay? So we got all these positives leaking out. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So now what's happening to the inside? It's getting more negative. It's getting more negative. You know, we already have a situation where there is not a lot of sodium inside the cell. So what does it want to do? It already wants to go in. Now it's being given a electrical incentive to enter the cell. Now, how does it do this? Well, there's another way that potassium gets in and out of the cells. So, and that is, hold on. I skipped a step. So basically, there are channels for both sodium and there are channels for potassium. So you got all of these potassiums leaking out, and then a valve opens. Well, I'm simplifying. A valve opens, and sodium starts to leak in, thus bringing up the positive. Okay, but what did I say in the beginning? Potassium is higher on the inside, and sodium is higher on the outside. So we have these enzymes. They're called sodium-potassium pumps. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know the real name. So we have these sodium-potassium pumps. And remember I said that the chemical driving force, it's going to go from a higher to a lower. Well, sometimes you want it to go backwards. So in order to get this potassium back inside, the sodium-potassium pump, using this chemical called ATP, shifts that, pumps that sodium back out, and pumps that potassium back in. Okay? Long story short, you need this sodium. Why do you need this sodium? Okay? There are two major, super important reasons. And I hope I didn't confuse you in the beginning. I just needed to lay a little bit of groundwork so that you understood what sodium was doing. What's sodium doing? It's moving around. Now, why is it moving around? Well, it's moving around for two very specific reasons. So that you can move through space, and so that you can have the conscious and sometimes unconscious thoughts that propel you through space. What do I mean by that? So basically, sodium, remember I said electrolyte? Okay. What does electrolyte kind of sound like? Electrical, electricity. I even said electrical driving force. So basically what happens is, and I'm going to really simplify this because I need you to understand this if you don't have the educational background. You may be well educated. You may be a lawyer. You may be an engineer, but you may not understand this because it's very specific information. But I feel that it's the type of specific information that everyone needs. So basically what happens is salt comes in, okay, to change the negative of a cell to a positive. And then that causes another cell to do the same thing, and another cell to do the same thing, and different sections within the cell across the line to change their, are you ready for this? Voltage. So we need salt because it is a perfect medium for transferring current. That's a very simplified explanation for it, but it is the most basic. It is the most simple explanation. You need salt in your body to transfer current, to transfer this voltage across the cells. Specifically, and I'm going to use two very specific instances, your muscle cells. So basically what happens is you have this neuron, okay? That's the stuff that that the electrical signals in our brain travel through, okay? And it connects with the muscle cell, okay? And then we think, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. I should get in there. So a signal is sent, and it, are you ready? We're going to give you some definite or some terminology. It innervates. Basically what that means is it transfers a signal from itself to another cell. And this neuron is innervating a muscle cell. And that causes sodium to come flooding into the cell, raises the voltage, goes down, does it again, goes down, does it again, goes down, till it gets to this long tube, okay, that separates the muscle cell, and it causes a reaction that, and I'm skipping a bunch of steps because the steps are important, but they're not important in the story, okay? They go into this tube, okay, and release calcium. And that calcium is the primary agent that allows your muscles to, react and contract. It works in conjunction with, remember I mentioned ATP before? So it works in conjunction with that. And I know I'm simplifying this, but I think that every kid in America, every kid in the world should know this process on a very simple, basic level. Because once you have this understanding, all of a sudden, the reason for sodium and why I should watch my sodium and why I should ensure that, I'm going to say this, you should get enough sodium in your body. That is when it becomes important to you. That's when you have buy-in to this knowledge. That's when you take a vested interest in understanding what's going into your body. So now you have a very simplified understanding of why sodium's important on muscles. So what does it do? Let's just recap real quick. It sends a signal down the muscle all the way till it hits this switch that releases calcium and allows the muscle to contract, right? That's basically it. So it also does something else. Now, remember I said that neuron, that brain cell, that neuronal cell connects to the muscle cell, okay? Well, how do you think that signal got from the brain all the way down to the muscle cell? Sodium. Same exact thing. Sodium flushed in. Remember, outside the tire, inside's lower, rushed in, raised the voltage along the way more, raised the voltage along the way more, and all the way down the cell until it got to the end where it needed to do its job. So sodium is actually highly causative in all of the reactions that occur in your body. Basically, nothing could happen in your body without sodium. Well, wait a minute. I thought sodium was bad. I need to watch my sodium. You do need to watch your sodium. But you need to also ensure that you are getting enough sodium. And I have a little bit of information that I'm going to give you here. And that is, I'm going to have another sip of coffee real quick. And I hope so I put this podcast up on my, within my program. We have this message board, and every time a new episode comes out, and I know I'm going to get some flack. You simplified that too much. You didn't go into detail enough. Okay, but this is not an academic discussion. Well, it kind of is, but it's an educational discussion. It's a primer. It's a way to get individuals to understand this material. I think we can introduce this material far sooner to kids if we just put it in a simplified format like I just did. I think that would be tremendous. You could start talking about this stuff in 5th grade. You could start talking about this stuff in middle school. These kids can, my son growing up could tell me everything about Star Wars, the littlest, tiniest minutia of information. So by simplifying this information, not only do we help kids who we need to, there is an obesity epidemic going on right now among our youth. And we have I'm on a soapbox. Anyways, but we could also educate billions of individuals who could use this and lead healthier lives. So I was talking about how much sodium do you need? How much sodium should be in your body? So we have a thing called blood sodium levels. And most of us aren't going to know on a day-to-day basis what our blood sodium levels are. They're 99.9% of us. I'm giving you this information just as so the next time you're at a bar or you're at work, you could say, well, did you know the blood sodium levels? So that blood sodium level, the normal range, is 135 to 145 milliequivalents per liter. Okay, so that's per liter of blood plasma, I'm assuming. So what's interesting is I watched a little deep dive into dehydration and hyponatremia, two opposite ends of the spectrum. And in terms of, so what is hyponatremia? Another terminology thing. It's going to be fine. It'll be helpful to know what it is. So hyponatremia is when you dilute your sodium levels within your blood. And it can kill you. It can actually kill you relatively quickly. And the levels don't need to be diluted that much. So I told you 135 to 145. So I think, and if I'm wrong about this, hit me, but the data that I saw was that hyponatremia can start at 120 milliequivalents per liter, which that's not a big percentage change. So hyponatremia, how do you do that? How do you dilute your sodium content in your blood? And plasma is blood plasma, mostly made of water. Okay. And there's some organic chemicals within it, but it's mostly made of water. But if you add even more water, it dilutes. What does dilute mean? Dilute means have more water than whatever else is in it. So if you have a cup of coffee, okay, and it's filled to here, and I pour water in it, and the original coffee is now distributed evenly throughout this entire coffee mug, leaving less coffee and more water. I have diluted the coffee. So basically the same thing can happen within your blood, and it's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous because your body needs to be able, your cells need to be able to get to, it becomes a spatial issue. So normally, let's say this is your blood vessel, okay? And there's sodium all over the inside of it, and the cell walls are all right here. You know what I mean? And now, when you've diluted it, it's now has this much farther to travel to go. You know, it didn't increase. Your blood vessel didn't increase. There's just more water, and the sodium ions, little tiny atoms and molecules, it's farther to go. So your body's not able to freely grab that sodium that it needs. Now dehydration creates a unique situation in that the sodium needs a medium, water, to maintain the charge, okay? In order to increase the voltage, in order for the sodium to transfer through. Medium is just something that can carry it, okay? And water carries the sodium and also can carry an electrical charge. We all know that, you know, in the movies when the power line drops and the guy, don't step in the water, you know, so you need this medium of water to carry the current, to carry not just the current, but the sodium as well, so that the cells can receive it. So you're in this weird damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I watched a really great recap of an article in Good Housekeeping, of all places. Way to go, Good Housekeeping, where they talk about a new study that came out and the dangers of high sodium intake. And one of the recommendations that they make is to reduce, Good Housekeeping, not the study. I didn't read this study. I'm going to be honest about that. But Good Housekeeping recommends that the American Heart Association figures on where you should keep your intake of sodium, and that is 1,500 milligrams a day. And the information that they gave is that average sodium intake of an adult individual in the United States is 3,500 milligrams per day. Now, I could say that 1,500 is what you should be taking. 3,500! Well, 3,500 isn't that difficult to hit. Just about everything you have has salt. I had a talk with Dr. Harrison, who was our nutrition professor, and we also had this discussion about sodium, and he said it's virtually impossible for you to have a diet that does not have some sodium in it. You're going to. So with that in mind, and since we have such a high sodium intake, and food is just made with sodium, it's something that's been done all the way back to ancient times. It was the first preservative, you know what I mean? So we have evolved over time, over the past, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, to have an appetite for sodium. I don't know if that was developed, if that was an evolutionary change, or if that's just something that was inherent in all species. But we it's pretty hard to not have sodium in your diet. And I'm curious if 1,500 milligrams of sodium is doable. I could probably, there's probably someone watching this right now going, "You ass, it's totally doable." I can't believe you would say that, you can't get down to 1,500. Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I haven't done enough studies on it. But if the average is 3,500 and the average, nutritional intake of an American is subpar, then I'm thinking that 2,000, 2,500 might not be that difficult. So what do you do if you're just having trouble? Okay. Let me have a sip of coffee. I'm framing this horribly too. I know it. Actually, let me frame it a different way. What are some ways that you can reduce your sodium intake? Not salt your food as much. Make choices on what you want to put inside you. But there's also that part, make choices about what you put inside you nutritionally. There's something you can do to, are you ready for this? Offset the sodium. And that's super important. And this does not get talked about. All we talk about is sodium, sodium, sodium. Sodium's bad. Well, if there was a way to offset this sodium, wouldn't that be great news? We tend to shout from the loudest podium the findings that we have, yet don't come up with any solutions at all. We just say, it's got to stop. It's got to stop now. And that, I'm sorry, is bullshit. Because, and I'm going to look into the efficacy of this, how effective this is. And I'm going to get back to you because we're going to do a follow-up on sodium, I think. I think I'm going to have Dr. Adolphs, who has not been on the show. He's going to be on the show in the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about this. So how do we offset sodium? How do you do that? Drink water? No. You can hydrate. That's perfectly fine, and you should hydrate, but hydrate reasonably, okay? Sip water over time, consistently urinate. I can't say that was a part of the podcast. There you go. But hydrate reasonably and consistently. Don't chug water. That leads to hyponatremia. When they had those water challenges on the radio and people died, they died of hyponatremia. So then if that's not the way to offset sodium, what do we do? Well, there are dietary choices that you can make. There are things that you can eat that will offset this. And ironically, remember I said I was going to get to it at the end? Potassium is the key. So increase your intake of potassium, and it will reduce your sodium. I don't know the mechanism. I'm going to look into that because I want to do an entire episode on potassium as well. I think that'd be fun. So what are foods that offset sodium? And I have them all written here. One of them is sweet potatoes, greens, tomatoes and tomato sauce, white beans, kidney beans, non-fat yogurt, oranges, bananas, and cantaloupe. I'm so excited about this because I have a couple of nutritional suggestions that I'm going to give you that I think will help you, and they're very simple and they're very inexpensive. And the first one is potatoes. So I'm not a big sweet potato fan. I don't know why. My mom loves them. I don't like the consistency of them, but I do like potatoes. And you got to check the labels. You got to check the labels. Tater tots, not the Ore-Ida ones, generally the store brand, because the store brand uses simpler ingredients, because it's a cost-effective thing. So what do? For tater tots, a lot of times what they do is they just mince potatoes and then pack them together and use a little bit of vegetable oil. I'm not a super big fan of vegetable oil, but in a pinch, you're a lot healthier eating some oven-baked tater tots than you are anything else. Also, store brand French fries, because also the store brand tends to use the simplest ingredients. So that's a great way to eat potatoes. And make a fist, okay? Grab a fistful, and that's about a serving. That's a good, nice measure. As far as greens, of course, grab a salad. Go to Walmart, grab a salad, take all the gunk and use a low-fat dressing, pour it into a bowl, and there you go. Tomatoes, I love cherry tomatoes. My son loves them too. He'll eat them in a bag. And a lot of times, pasta dishes that I used to eat, I now eat with basmati rice. So I'll have chicken basmati rice and tomato sauce. It sounds weird, but it's actually really, really good. And it's a way you can get those tomatoes. It's interesting because every once in a while I have cravings for stuff like chicken parmesan or like meatballs in sauce. And I used to always think it was the lycopene, I think it is, that's in tomatoes. And it might be, but I also wonder if it's the potassium. My body's craving the potassium. So the other thing that I eat is oranges. I eat those little mandarin oranges. You can get those at Walmart. You can just pop in. They come in a bag. I eat 2 of them a night, usually with a protein bar before I go to bed, so I can get some carbohydrates and protein so I can have some good dreams. And my digestive tract has all of the energy resources it needs to operate effectively. That sounded like I was selling something. And bananas. Every time I go swimming, I swim 3 days a week, a half mile. I eat a banana on my way into the pool. Like clockwork. If I don't have a banana, I go to the desk in the little food area that they have at the gym, and I'm like, do you have any bananas? Yes, no problem. So why do you want to be doing this? Why do you want to be loading up on this potassium to offset your sodium, your high sodium intake? One, you want to reduce that sodium intake. But 2, potassium helps counter the effects of sodium, as I said, but it also may help lower your blood pressure. How dope is that? How awesome is that? How cool is that? So there you go. You need sodium. Make sure you get sodium, but just don't overdo it and be smart about it. If you have any questions about any of the stuff that I just talked about, or if you think I said anything, out of step, out of line, or some of my information was correct, please hit me up in either the comments or send me a message, and I will do everything within my power to rectify it. All right. I hope you like this little deep dive into sodium. I wanted to give you some simple information so that you can make better choices. So that you can live longer and bug your kids for a lot longer. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed it. All right. So, basically, that's it. If you do, as I said, have any questions, reach out to me. This podcast was brought to you by who else? Sea and Land Fitness. Head on over to www.sandlfit.com, sandlfit.com. honeybadgers.com and pick up some merch. Pick up our new program. We just put out our Tier 3 fitness program for people who want to go into the military or just want to get themselves into shape. It's a wonderful beginner exercise program that'll really, really push you. There's some sports psychology in there. If you need any consultations or anything, we also have that. You can find that in the store. You can sit down with me for a half an hour, and we can go through your stuff and try to help you out. All right, that's it. Talk to you soon. Later.